The sky over New York was closing in with shades of lead, reflecting in the tall windows of an apartment that seemed more like a glass fortress than a home. Among modern furniture and silent machines, a man remained alone, surrounded by wealth, yet exiled from ordinary life. His name shone in business magazines, but his soul carried a silence no one dared to decipher. Before we start, subscribe now so you don't miss more incredible stories like this one. Oh, and before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love hearing from you and always read every message. The restaurant's dining room was like a showcase of power. Men in dark suits flaunted watches that gleamed under the golden light. Women draped in silk dresses murmured about trips to Europe and investments as if they were mere hobbies. The air was thick with expensive perfumes, the aroma of spices from the kitchen, and a certain silent disdain for those serving around them. Amid hurried steps, Elena Duarte carried trays that seemed heavier than life itself. Every gesture was measured, every smile rehearsed, because a mistake here didn't just cost scolding, it cost humiliation. Her colleagues glanced at her sideways, as if her delicacy were weakness, as if she were too fragile to withstand that environment. "Come on, Elena, table 7 is already complaining," hissed the manager, his face furrowed with impatience. She hurried, her heart beating out of rhythm. But fate seemed to mock her. A customer suddenly stood up, and in a sharp sidestep, the tray tipped. Crystal flew through the air like a shining rain, shattering against the white marble floor. A chilling silence swept the room, followed by muffled laughter. "That's why you don't hire inexperienced people," commented a woman with cold eyes, not caring if Elena heard her. "Poor thing. Maybe she's more used to serving in corner cafes," added a man, eliciting laughter from the neighboring table. Elena bent quickly, trying to collect the shards before anyone got hurt. Her fingers trembled, and the blush on her face burned like fire. With every piece she picked up, it felt as if she were gathering fragments of her dignity as well. Near the head table, sitting alone, was Adrian Blackwell. While everyone reveled in the cruel spectacle, he remained silent, eyes fixed on her. There was no laughter, no pity, only a strange attentiveness, as if in that fall he had recognized something the others could not see. But while the dining room delighted in her misfortune, Adrian's eyes shone differently, as if they held a secret about to be revealed. The manager, his face twisted with shame and anger, grabbed Elena's arm roughly and pulled her to the center of the room. Conversations resumed, but now they were laced with irony and expectation, as if everyone anticipated another spectacle. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the incident," he said, forcing an artificial smile. "Our team is committed to excellence, but unfortunately, not everyone can keep up with the pace demanded here." All eyes fell on Elena like arrows. Some discreetly filmed with their phones, capturing the scene to laugh later. She felt her throat tighten, her hands still trembling with the scent of spilled wine. "Perhaps you should go back to serving corner cafes, girl," a customer mocked, raising his glass to cruel applause. Elena's heart pounded, as if trying to escape her chest. She had no voice, no defense. The collective laughter filled the room, each chuckle a cruel reminder of her insignificance. Then, a deep voice cut through the atmosphere. "Interesting," said Adrian Blackwell, rising from his chair with the calm of someone who needed to prove nothing to anyone. The silence fell instantly. It was rare for him to speak in public, and each word seemed weightier than gold. "You laugh at a fall, but tell me," he continued, walking slowly through the room, his shoes echoing against the marble. "How many of you here could get up after a tumble, still under the gaze of everyone?" The room fell silent, arrogance frozen on their faces. The manager swallowed hard, unsure how to react. Elena, still on her knees collecting shards, looked up at Adrian. There was no sarcasm in his voice, only a veiled challenge to the entire environment. He stopped before her and offered his hand to help her up. The elite's eyes narrowed, as if they could not believe what they saw. Or perhaps true strength is only measured when there's no one to applaud, said Adrian, staring at the guests with intensity. No one believed he would truly defend her. But the silence spreading through the room ignited the air like contained fire, ready to spread. Elena hesitated but took Adrian's hand. Her fingers touched his, cold and firm, and for a moment it felt as if the entire room disappeared, leaving only that improbable gesture. The millionaire everyone feared and revered was helping her rise, as if she were the only person who mattered in that suffocating space. Murmurs resumed. Poisonous. "Is this some kind of show?" whispered a lady wearing a pearl necklace. "He must be enjoying this at her expense," replied another, with a crooked smile. The manager, nervous, tried to intervene. "Mr. Blackwell, it's not necessary. The employee will be properly reprimanded." Adrian lifted his gaze to him, so cold and sharp that the man stepped back without another word. "Dignity is not reprimanded," said Adrian in a low but audible voice. "And perhaps in this place, it's the only thing missing." Elena stood frozen, her face still burning, unsure whether to thank him or simply disappear. But there was something in his tone, something that didn't seem like pity. It was as if he had seen beyond her mistake, as if he had recognized something dormant that she herself didn't know she possessed. A young waiter, trying to defend her, murmured, "She's hard-working. She just needs a chance." The room erupted in louder laughter. "A chance? Here," mocked a businessman. "This place is not for amateurs or dreamers." Elena felt the humiliation weigh even more. But at the same time, something different pulsed in her chest. It was as if, in those strange seconds, Adrian had sparked an invisible flame, a silent call to not bow before cruel laughter. The guests expected her to cry, to apologize, and vanish. But instead, Elena lifted her eyes, steady, and met the millionaire's gaze. And it was in that moment, when everyone thought she would break, that something in her eyes shone, and no one could predict what would be revealed next. The silence in the room was different now. It wasn't just the absence of laughter. There was a palpable tension, as if the air had thickened, charged with expectation. Elena, still standing, felt the weight of all eyes, but something inside her had changed. "Perhaps you don't realize it, but true strength isn't always visible," said Adrian, eyes fixed on the critics around him. "And sometimes it comes from where you least expect it." The words resonated, and some guests exchanged confused glances. Adrian wasn't just challenging the environment, he was also leaving subtle clues that there was more to this moment than could be ignored. Then, as if the scene had been carefully choreographed by fate, Adrian invited Elena to approach a central table. Amid curious murmurs, he handed her a tablet with complex graphs from a project the young woman had never imagined understanding. "I want you to explain this report to the attendees," he said calmly. "Not to impress them, just to show that sometimes reality is more surprising than appearances." The room exploded in restrained surprise. How could a simple waitress interpret the data of a billion-dollar company? Many raised eyebrows, some whispered among themselves. The manager looked ready to faint. Elena, feeling her heart race, took a deep breath. Inside, she trembled, but outwardly she maintained an upright posture. She began to explain each point clearly, translating numbers and projections into simple yet precise words. With each sentence, incredulity grew, and the laughter that once dominated the space gave way to intrigued silence. Adrian watched with a faint smile, satisfied. He knew he had planted a seed, the perception that the underestimated young woman held hidden skills, intelligence, and courage enough to turn the tide in that hostile environment. The antagonist, a customer with an arrogant look and cruel smile, hesitated for the first time. It was no longer just Elena. It was Adrian, but also the collective surprise that something unexpected was happening there. It wasn't just skill, it was dignity. And suddenly, the silence fell over the room, heavy and profound, as if everyone had realized they were witnessing something greater than mere appearances. The room was in a silent trance. Laughter and whispers had disappeared, replaced by an electric tension that ran through each table, each gaze. Elena stood holding the tablet like a shield, but now she no longer needed protection. What had once been weakness was now strength. The arrogant customer who had ridiculed her rose, blushing with anger and embarrassment. "This is impossible," he stammered. She shouldn't even be here." "And yet she is," said Adrian, with the calm of someone who knows his own power. "And those who think status or arrogance can replace merit or courage are mistaken." Elena breathed deeply, feeling a wave of confidence growing with each second. It wasn't just explaining the graphs. It was the revelation that she, the young waitress, had intelligence, vision, and determination no one had predicted. She was no longer underestimated or invisible. Meanwhile, Adrian stayed by her side, firm, almost untouchable. His presence was silent support, a reminder that no one alone needs to yield to the pressure of the crowd. He never laughed, never mocked. He simply provided space for the truth to emerge without interference. The audience began to notice the shift in balance. Eyes that once judged now leaned in respect. Whispers of surprise and admiration rippled through the room, breaking the atmosphere of arrogance that had previously dominated. The antagonist, realizing his control had evaporated, tried to intervene again, but every word sounded weak and pointless in the face of the reality asserting itself. He was powerful only in appearance. True strength lay in courage, dignity, and intelligence demonstrated by Elena, silently validated by Adrian's presence. The tension peaked as Elena concluded her explanation, eyes steady and posture impeccable. A deep silence hung in the air, as if everyone awaited the final verdict. Then, slowly, some began to applaud, timid at first, then louder, more intense, until the entire room joined in recognition. But the final blow didn't come from force or power. It came from a truth everyone had tried to forget, which now, in the face of Elena's courage, could no longer be ignored. The room, which minutes before had vibrated with tension and disbelief, now breathed differently. Admiration, respect, and a strange sense of reverence. The antagonist, previously so imposing, remained motionless, realizing that his arrogance was merely a facade in the face of revealed truth. Adrian approached Elena, offering his hand again, this time with an almost imperceptible smile, but filled with acknowledgement. She accepted, feeling that this simple connection symbolized much more than support. It was confirmation that courage and dignity could transform reality anywhere, no matter how hostile. "Are you ready to leave all of this behind?" Adrian asked, in a tone that needed no answer. Elena nodded, still absorbing the weight and intensity of what had happened. Together, they walked through the dining room, each step marked by eyes that had once judged and now admired. A simple gesture, Adrian's hand supporting hers, Elena's upright posture, silently proclaiming victory over disdain, humiliation, and fear. On the way out, Elena discreetly dropped the napkin that had been the source of so much ridicule. Adrian bent down and picked it up, saying nothing, handing it back to her as if returning not just an object, but restored dignity. Sometimes, small gestures speak louder than any speech, he said calmly. As they crossed the corridor lit by the gleam of glass windows, the antagonist remained behind, his presence now irrelevant, a shadow of the illusory power he believed he possessed. And as they walked out, no one dared laugh again, for everyone had finally understood what they had witnessed, a truth that could not be ignored. Courage, dignity, and inner strength can transform even the most hostile environments. In the days that followed, the story of that night spread throughout the city, not as idle gossip, but as an example that courage can cross invisible barriers. Elena continued working at the restaurant, but now with a different gaze. Each step, each gesture, carried newly discovered confidence. She was no longer just a waitress. She was someone who had faced scorn and emerged transformed. Adrian, in turn, began to open up a little more. The glass windows of his mansion, which had once reflected only solitude, now reflected life, conversations, and shared laughter. Elena's presence not only brought lightness to his world, but also inspired changes in how he viewed success and human strength. Together, they began to explore not only business but life itself with new perspectives. Everyday small gestures, a shared coffee, a silent walk through the city, a conversation about dreams, turned routine into memorable moments. The world that had once seemed distant and cold became a space of possibilities. The restaurant, once a stage for humiliation, became a symbol of overcoming. Customers, employees, and colleagues learned that respect and empathy are more powerful than any status or wealth. And Adrian and Elena together became an example of how trust, courage, and partnership can break down invisible walls and build bridges of understanding. In the end, the message was clear. True strength is not measured by fortune, appearance, or power, but by the ability to face fear, defend dignity, and recognize the value of others. In a world blinded by arrogance and illusory brilliance, sometimes a single act of quiet courage is enough to transform lives and open windows that once seemed impossible to cross.